If you compare this number compared to the last year, you're still a little low. But if you compare it with the previous 2 years, okay, we have done much better.
What kind of profiles or the job roles they are offering? Can you elaborate on that?
Our students are strong on the analytical side.
What about the branches like mechanical and civil? What do you think are the prospects in placement for these students?
The number of jobs may be less, but there are some significant number of jobs still there.
Will you advise students to go for branches like mechanical and civil?
In a country for development, you need infrastructure. You need manufacturing.
We recently saw some news about placements were happening in IIT Bombay. What kind of placements happened? Can you please elaborate about the data?
It's now just started. I think it's too early to get the complete number. It's basically a system that is also run by the student themselves. So normally we don't play much role in terms of the entire process. If you compare this number compared to the last year, you're still a little low. Okay. We have not come to the level where it was there last year. But if you compare it with the previous 2 years, okay, we have done much better.
And in terms of offers made or in terms of average packages?
No, I would say that, right now, let's consider the number. Okay, I'll come to the average. See, there is a danger of doing average. The reason is that, normally, suppose when you talk about salary and others, packages, normally you do not talk about average. You talk about the median. In the median level, it has gone up because the majority of them, the companies which have come, they are predominantly this year, there is a preponderance of a lot more domestic companies compared to the international companies. See, sometimes when you take the average of these international companies, your average goes up, but that doesn't tell you anything because, overall it could be lower. Previous year, what happened after, because of the pandemic, you're opening up. So during the pandemic, many companies did not possibly, hire, they had a hiring freeze. And now they opened up last year in a big way. Okay. Now this year, because see, when you hire, it is for the next year, right? So during that time, we find that the total number of the offer is little less than what you had last year, but it is much, much higher than the previous 2 years. Okay, that's probably what I say. Second aspect is that you have seen recently that many of the big companies, which is to come in the international companies, they themselves are retrenching people, right? I think you might have seen this is because somehow overhiring or there is some kind of a little bit of recession all over, the world. So on the other hand, so that kind of offer is less, but the domestic companies are now, I think, doing a lot better, and they are coming in a lot more numbers and hiring a lot more people. So overall, I think it's a much greater good rather than a list number of very excellent offer, I would say. Whatever the total number of offers is already more than what happened in the entire year, okay, before, at the time of pandemic.
What kind of profiles or the job roles they are offering? Can you elaborate on that?
See, you have to look at what people want in IIT Bombay students. Our students are strong on the analytical side, okay? So any company, and also the market rate is a little higher in terms of placement. I think this is well understood all over. So when a company comes here, then they want also from the company perspective, best value for the money that they invest in terms of hiring. So in that particular case, they look at, since I have to pay a lot more, I have to extract a lot more from this, particular set of IITians that they will be hiring. So which are the jobs which probably brings in more revenue for the company? That's where they actually would like to hire them. This is a pure form of, economic decision. And that way it turns out wherever there is like a consultancy, IT, computer science, okay, let's say quantitative analysis, these are the ones typically they dominate on the first few days. Then subsequently, we also get fairly good number of people who are on the manufacturing and other side, because now, thanks to Make in India and several, Atmanirbhar Bharat. There are a lot of such initiatives that the government has taken. And because of that, the industry is also coming up with a good demand. And we find that quite a few of our students are also going for it.
In placement drives in almost entire India, we see a lot of focus on the students who belong to CS and IT branches. And probably these are the people, these are the students who bag the highest packages or the packages toward the higher sides. And they are the reason why average packages go higher. So what about the branches like mechanical and civil? What do you think are the prospects in placement for these students?
It is true that a good chunk of our students go on analytics side, okay, because that's where I think the IIT education is good at. Okay, you have to look at that also. But we do see fairly good number of people who are going into the infrastructure and manufacturing, because if you're talking about mechanical, civil, and nowadays, there are a lot of nice things have come in the mechanical and other sides, like, for example, additive manufacturing, then the 3D printing and others. So it has also revolutionized this whole, So if you look at a lot of this design and other concept, okay, it's in this particular space, there is a fairly good amount of hiring of our students, okay. See, you have to look at today's way of doing, I think, from the industry perspective. So there would be jobs which would actually defining, how to design something, what are the design validation and, the planning. So, and secondly, it's actual the implementation, the shop floor or the job shop, you could say that. So typically our students, okay, go for the back office work. So you may not see them in the front that you see that, because that's where their strengths are. And any company would always try to leverage that. I think that's where you will see that the number of jobs may be less, okay, if you compare overall, but there are some significant number of jobs still there, and our people do go for that.
Will you advise students to go for branches like mechanical and civil, or like the trend is going for IT-related fields? Will this be happening in the future as well?
It's difficult. I tell you one thing. Typically, you see all over the country, the number of, I would say, the graduates in computer science, IT, is a lot more than in other areas. Okay, that's because before this, I think .com and all, India invested quite a bit on this particular area, and it paid off. Okay, so many of the common people in India, they do see that there is a great opportunity for people. Okay, now if you look at some of the big service industries that we have, whether Infosys, Cognizant, whatever the other things, Wipro, they hire a large number of people who come, from that particular discipline. They want to take people, and they solve a lot of the services industry from across the globe. And there is a great potential. India should leverage that. Okay, and that's where we have, I think, a lot of opportunity for people to go and get a good job and make a nice living. But you also need, see, when you actually have all these, I would say the computer and IT, but you also need other areas in a country for development. You need infrastructure. You need manufacturing. See, the China, they've had how they boosted up the entire manufacturing industry. So you do need that. Okay. So that has to be encouraged. So it has to be collective, process. There has to be mechanism to see that we do have manpower, for this particular set of industry also. And also, I would say, because it may be, there are prospective, students, career, I think minded people listening to this. See, when you go for some area where a lot more people go, it's a crowded space. Okay. So how far do you go? Because you have to be really great in terms of being the top computer scientist to be absorbed in somewhere. Or if you have a plan to become like a great professor somewhere, or like some of the great individuals, doing it. So competition would also be much, I would say, higher in that particular case. So that has also to be looked at. Sometimes we just go like across the flow, but I think people should look into that also.
Because the major chunk of students also are preferring, the toppers are preferring CS and IT fields, will it not be wise for institutes like IITs or any other institutes as well to increase upon the number of seats for these branches and reduce upon the number of seats for other branches?
It is happening. It's not that. See, finally, it's a demand and supply, right? So there are, see, for example, if you look at today in IIT Bombay, right, the E and CS, these two are some of the, I would say, the biggest departments, okay, in terms of number of students they enroll. And on the other hand, in certain other cases, we may have little, it has shrunk a little bit, okay? But, we don't have too much of flexibility, or rather, I would put it in a slightly different way. See, it's very interesting that if you look at in India, there are a large number of privately funded institutions, and many of them provide quality education. And a major chunk of our graduates come from them, right? Now, typically, for a private institution where you can charge certain amount of fees and which would pay up for the entire expenses, when you go for certain things like computer science department, it's much cheaper, okay, to actually run that institute. If I have to do like a material science department or aerospace department or certain other departments, it's a lot more expensive, right? So we being something of the nationally funded, the institute, we have to ensure that tomorrow there is a tomorrow and there is a life beyond computer science. So we must ensure that these are some of the classical areas. They, of course, they are evolved, but they must be maintained because thankfully our ministry have been supporting them. They have been quite generous in terms of supporting them, right? And it has to be done because they are more expensive. It's more expensive for us to teach some student in terms of, let's say, doing something in, let's say, chemistry or something, because there are a lot of chemicals, others, sophisticated analytical equipments are required. Similarly, it could be something, let's say, supposing I have to have a wind tunnel or something, in aerospace department. It costs a lot of money. So private, I would say the institutes, it is easier for them to go for ECS type of thing, whereas we should do in all areas.